Alright, today we're going to be taking a huge, comprehensive look at pretty much every piece of Sega hardware that I have. Not every individual piece, but every unique piece. And, naturally, we're going to be starting with the Sega Master System. Look at this beauty. And it is huge. This is like the Xbox of its time. Better graphics than the competition, huge, hard to, it takes up a ton of shelf space. This bad boy takes up, I could probably fit a third system on the shelf that this inhabits if it wasn't, like 12.5 million years wide. But anyway, I like this. I like the power base. I like this piece of hardware a lot. It plays a lot of great games. And let's take a look. The primary format of the games it plays are these sweet cartridges, which all look exactly the same. This one happens to be a PAL cartridge. There's absolutely no region blocking on these bad boys, so it will play this PAL cartridge just fine, which looks pretty much exactly the same as a United States cart. Some cartridges in the US have blue label, but the only difference between this and an American cartridge is it has this white grid, whereas all the US games I have a black grid, but still on this ugly maroon doo-doo red color, which matches the system nicely. I mean, it fits together. And the cartridge fits in there perfectly. It's real snug. It's not a battle to get out. No problems like the NES with its little push-down, I call it the VCR model. Everyone calls it a toaster, but to me the original Nintendo looks like a VCR. You put the cartridge in and it goes down, just like a VCR. Anyway, cartridges go in real nice, never have a problem with them, and most of the Master System games I see come with the case. For the most part, I never see these loose. They got a nice little grip right here, easy to put in, easy to take out. And there were also games that came on these little cards, very reminiscent of a Hue card. Actually, I happen to have some handy. Very reminiscent of a Hue card. Almost the same size. The Master System cartridge is a little bit longer, same width. The Hue card seems to be a little bit thicker. But, about the same thing. And those plug right into the card input. And that works pretty well. There's not too many games on here, and this game isn't anything to actually worry about playing. I just have it. It came in a bundle off eBay, and, it's cool to have one of the card games. And the other thing I have to go with my Master System set, actually, I do have the light phaser. I do have the light gun. But I also have this. I have the adapter for the 3D goggles. And the 3D goggles plug into here. Kind of similar to a headphone jack. I don't know if it's the same size. I don't know if it's 3.5 millimeters. But, looks like a little headphone jack. And I do not have the goggles. The goggles are very, very rare and pretty expensive. But I do have this adapter, which, it's cool to have. I keep it in there just to keep dust out, and because it fits, so, it fits flush, it's built to go in there. It looks like it belongs. So I usually keep it in there, because, it's not hurting nothing, and like I said, I'm never going to be playing this game. Tested it out before, it's nothing too great. And this is the first version of the Sega Master System control pad. The D-pad it gets the job done. It works with some games. Some other games like Shinobi I have a little bit of issue playing with because, I'll be going right and I'll accidentally hit up or down or something, or usually down, and make my guy accidentally squat. The buttons are kind of mushy. Some people might not like that. I do like that. I do like the mushiness of the button. And this little hole right here, there's a little plastic nub that screws in there, so it's like a little joystick, which I do not have, and I wish I did have, because I really want to see if that makes this suck less. And it's an all-around awesome controller. Now, you may be noticing it's similar. It's reminiscent of the NES control pad. You know, the same general idea, but it's missing the pause and reset button, which are actually on the unit itself, which kind of sucks. If you're sitting away from the TV and you decide you got to take a leak or go get the pizza or let the dog out, you know, whatever, you got to get up and walk your lazy ass all the way over to the Master System and hit pause. So that can kind of suck. But I have zero complaints. The graphics in this thing look great. It's a lot better looking than the Nintendo, but you know, the Nintendo won hands down. So, but the games are quality, they look great, and they play great, and it's definitely a system worth owning. And yeah, that in a nutshell is the Sega Master System, or the Power Base. Alright, the next piece of hardware we're going to be taking a look at, naturally, is the 16-bit Sega Genesis Model 1. It's got this sweet headphone port with this sliding volume control, on-off toggle switch, a reset button. I like this stylish dome. When I was a kid and my brother still lived in my parents' house, his girlfriend, now wife, bought him a Sega Genesis, and I do believe that it was this model, and that's when my love affair with RoboCop vs. Terminator first came to bloom. I think that's like one of the only games he had. At least that's the only one I played. And this is a good looking console. It's game format of choice, the cartridge. And here's another little rant, and I've kind of wanted to make a video about this, but it's a stupid thing to make an entire video about. The angry video game nerd, he was talking about the Atari Jaguar and how their games have that ugly little curved handle on top for pulling it out. And he says, other systems don't have a little groove to yank the game. Yeah, he uses a Sega Genesis cart as an example. And the problem with that is that it fucking does have a grip for you to pull the game out. It's a load of bullshit. He's just trying to find something to bitch about, which, that's well after he jumped the shark. I've not been a fan of his videos for a while. Actually, I think it was that video that was him jumping the shark. That whole sequence of Death Kitty chasing the Jaguar Cube around, which was clearly just a laser pointer, I really could have done without that. I like watching these videos to learn about video games, and a lot of the older videos did just that. Like his Sega CD and 32x videos, I think, are great, and they were what actually inspired me to go out and get a Genesis and 32x and Sega CD. Quite the opposite. Most people seem to be dissuaded away from the 32x and the Sega CD because of those videos. I saw a lot of potential in the systems, and the Sega CD is one of my favorite systems now. Anyway, it's bullshit. He complains that the Jaguar's got a stupid handle for pulling the cartridges out. Most cartridges have this. Nintendo cartridges, they have something to pull it out. Now, if he used Sega Master System cartridges, have something to pull out, a little grip. Now, if he used an example like N64 or Super Nintendo, actually, you can't even use the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo's got a goddamn eject button. Anyway, that has been way too much ranting. We're here to talk about the motherfucking Sega Genesis, and why it kicked ass. This is the Model 1. It's a good-looking system. I like the style of it. I mean, it doesn't look like any other electrical appliance. Doesn't really look like a computer. It's just a very unique and gorgeous design on this thing. And I think they look really damn good. Now, this is the original Sega Genesis controller. It's real big, and it's kind of comfortable, except for the way this curves in. If they curved out, this shit would be way more comfortable. It's like my hands are going this way, not this way. Pull out a little bit. It's like, it's just uncomfortable. My wrists are all bent. Yeah, it sucks. Okay. But it's got big, easy to push buttons. Great directional pad. The D-pad on the Sega Genesis controllers is perfect for fighting games. Pulling off Shoryukens and Hadokens is a fucking dream on this bad boy. Okay. And the first accessory I'm going to show off for the Model 1 Genesis is the power base converter. It's got a card input, so you can use the 3D goggles with it. It's got a pause button, no more reset. Something I like is this little door to keep dust out. You can kind of see exposed circuit boards down in there, and problem solved. Keep that closed. And this is just as good as a Master System. It will save you a lot of space, because this is probably a good 3.5 inches shorter than the original Master System. That bad boy is huge. I like the way that it fits. The molding, you know, it looks like it belongs. Like if you just saw this, you would think this is a console that exists and should look like this. You can still see the power light. I have the original box that the power base converter came in. It's got a little screw to keep it locked in, which sadly I do not have, so it's not complete. But, you know, I got it for like $5, so no complaining there. Bad boy off. So that is the Model 1 Sega Genesis. Okay, moving along. Okay, now we're getting into the good stuff. This is a different Model 1 Genesis, but it's attached to the Model 1 Sega CD, which is one of my personal favorite systems. Tons of amazing, classic, great, kick-ass games for this bad boy. I don't have this plugged in, but if I did, I would show you how to eject the tray and how that works. And it's got this sweet little access light and just the presentation. I think this is the best looking Sega CD Genesis combo. I think it looks like it belongs. The Model 2 Genesis and the add-ons with it look a little, I don't know, just look a little half-assed. But this looks like they were, you know, carefully designed and, you know, from the drawing board, like it was always intended to have a CD-ROM. And along with it, I have the CD backup RAM cart, which I love having this with my Sega CD. It gives you a lot more memory. It also has a rechargeable battery. The Sega CD itself has a rechargeable battery for its RAM, and it's a pretty kick-ass unit. And with it, a lot of the Sega CD games support the use of the 6-button controller, which I find to be the better Genesis controller. This is my personal favorite. This is the one I always use. It fits the hands a lot better. A lot more ergonomic. The buttons aren't as big, which I did like the big buttons on the 3-button controller, but this is where it's at. And the games that use this, mostly the fighting games, you need the extra buttons. So this is the controller I'd recommend, which you can use with any model Genesis. Okay, that is the Sega CD. My personal favorite game for the Sega CD would have to be Snatcher, which is one of my all-time favorite games in general. And definitely worth the price If you can't afford it, burn it. I got a whole fucking stack of burnt games, but the ones that I really like, I go out of my way to get so that I have the case, can display it proudly. And when you have the real copy of Snatcher, the mouths while talking actually sync up to the audio. A burnt copy, the audio will not be synced right. So, a minor annoyance, but makes playing the real copy, you know, just a little more special. A lot of people say that the Model 1 Genesis has better sound, which personally I'm not a fan of the Genesis sound. There's a few games that have good music, but most of them don't. So, I really don't mind using the Model 2 Genesis. Since I got this more recently, I haven't gone through my equipment rack and replaced it with this. I'm going to probably get around to using this combo right here as my main Genesis and Sega CD unit. And one last thing that goes with the Sega Genesis. It's kind of a love-hate thing. Most people hate it, but the 32X. The reason why I'm decided I'm going to use this as my main unit is this fits a little more flushly. It fits on here a lot more solid, a lot more snugly. With the, let's take a look at it. With the Model 2, I don't have the plastic piece that braces it, so it's a lot more wobbly. So I'm always real careful when I insert games into that, and I don't really care for it. So I'm probably going to start using this since it fits a lot more snugly. Again, it's like they put a lot more care and effort into this unit. And I'm proud to finally be one of those people with the Ultra Mega Battleship Super Voltron Go-Go Gadget version of the Sega CD 32X Tower of Awesome Doom. So, 32X is primary format for games. Again, cartridges. Yeah, I definitely like the way that fits in there. It's very rock solid. So this is the way to go. And again, I only recommend it just because I like the way this looks. And I like the way this fits on snugly and isn't all wobbly. Because every time I try to put a game in on that 32X, it's all wobbly and just doesn't feel safe, and I don't want to screw anything up. So, yeah, there is that. Okay, on to the next part. Okay, next up, we have the Model 2 Sega Genesis, which on its own I also think is a very, very good looking system. This one in particular is in very good shape. In one day on Craigslist I managed to get 2 Model 2 Genesis, a Model 1, and 30 games for a total of $30. And I was after just a copy of Gunstar Heroes, which was complete. So that was a very good day. And at the time, the lowest asking price for Gunstar Heroes on Amazon was $30. So I sold 2 of the Genesis, doubled my money, got a shit ton of games, all complete, and Gunstar Heroes, and had a Genesis left over. So it's a pretty successful day on Craigslist. And this one's pretty basic. You just got your power, reset, cartridge input, which, you know, does a pretty good job of accepting Sega Genesis cartridges. Got your 2 controller ports. And on the side here, you also have a little door that comes off. Get rid of this little plastic protector. And where'd it go? And you use it with your Model 2 Sega CD. Pretty sharp. This one is really dirty. I got this one, it was either listed as untested or broke, and it had a bad fuse in it, and I replaced the fuse, and it kind of works. It might have been a bad connection right here, so I'm going to clean up the contacts and give this one a little more work and probably sell it if I can get it to work 100%. But as you can see in there, it is really gunky. I need to take it apart and clean off all the dust and crap. But this is the Model 2 Sega CD, which is designed to go along with the Model 2 Sega Genesis. But you could use the Model 1 Sega CD with the Model 2 Sega Genesis and vice versa. You could swap them all together. But if you have a Model 1 Genesis and a Model 2 Sega CD, it comes with this little piece of plastic. It's a little metal bar. These attach, and there's a screw that goes on. Set my camera down for a second. And fits together like that. Which, this is pretty long. This might actually be about even with the Master System in terms of width. So, zoom in, camera. Alright. So this is the Model 2 Sega CD that works with the Model 2 Sega Genesis, which is what it's designed for, but can also be used with the Model 1 Sega Genesis, which I think's pretty freaking ugly. This thing in general is pretty ugly, but what I do like about it and why I use it as my main unit is it's got this flip top. Less moving parts to break. You know, if this goes bad, it's just a spring. Nothing major, no electronic parts to try and replace. It's very simple. So that is all of my Sega Genesis stuff. Moving along, we'll be taking a look at one of my Saturns. Actually, we are not done looking at the Sega Genesis crap. I forgot one of my coolest pieces in my collection. And that is the Sega CDX. Yes, this bad boy is the rare... Well, actually this isn't the rarest Sega piece of hardware I have. But it's one of. And it's a built-in Sega Genesis and Sega CD. And it's very, very tiny. And the most common question I see about this is, does the 32X work with it? Yes, it does. I've tested it out personally and it works fine. Which, it looks awkward. Works or not, it looks awkward because the 32X really looks like a big ugly tumor now. Kind of looks like a weird airship or something. Zoom in, buddy. But, yeah, it will work. Just like it should. And, let's see, there's really not much else to say about it. It does use two AA's, which I forgot I had in here. They're still fresh, but I actually don't want to leave those in here, so I'll take them out after the video. But this will work as a Discman. You can use this as a portable CD player. And the problem is, it skips a lot. If you touch it, it'll skip. There's like no shock protection. So this really, I mean, it's a cool feature, and unless you have little honky pockets, I mean, you could probably fit this in a back pocket of your jeans or some such, but you really wouldn't want to. And it's a really cool compact unit. Definitely something to keep your eyes out for. If you see this, you know, at a flea market, a garage sale, junk store, wherever, pick it up, because these go for usually around $100 online. And I'm not gonna take a look at it in this Ultimate Sega hardware video, but I am going to mention my Pioneer LaserActive, which plays Genesis carts and Sega CD games. you can't use a 32X because the needed mixing cables do not exist on the Pioneer LaserActive. I have a separate video about that, and I just don't feel like digging around to get to it right now because it's kind of in an awkward place. But that would be the last piece of my Sega hardware. The spring that pops this up is broke, so that kind of sucks. But here's the power button. This lights up a nice, bright orange LCD glow when it's powered on. And this is probably the way to go. If these were more abundant and didn't cost as much, this is definitely the way to go if you want to play Sega CD games, because it uses one power supply for the Genesis and CDX. This one unit just takes one power supply, so that alone makes this amazing space saver, because it will clear you up from having one of those giant AC adapters on a power strip. So this is definitely something to keep your eyes out for. This is a badass piece of hardware. Okay, now we're moving on to the Saturn crap. Alright. Pardon my dust. This is one of my many, many, many spare Sega Saturns. This is kind of a big unit, but oh golly, it's real dusty in there. And this is one of my favorite consoles. This was my first 32-bit system back in the day, 1995 I assume. My aunt was seeing some dude named Stan, and he bought himself a Sega Saturn. And the three games I remember him having are Panzer Dragoon, Myst, and Revolution X with Aerosmith. And I played the shit out of Panzer Dragoon, Panzer Dragoon, and that Aerosmith game. I was a kid, didn't know any better. But it was a fun game back in the day when I was a kid. And I believe, I'm not sure, I don't have this burnt into my memory, but I think this is the Model 1 Sega Saturn, the one with the oval buttons. And why this matters is, there's a variation of the hardware. Internally there's 5 different versions, but I believe 3 of them have these oval buttons. And then there's the 2 with the circle buttons. Now, why is this important? The reason this is important is if you want to put a mod chip inside of your Sega Saturn, it is very easy and like 99% of the time successful on this model of the Sega Saturn, the one with the round buttons. The 2 round button models that I have are of the particular hardware variation on the inside that are the easiest. To install a mod chip in this, it's almost plug and play. You just take this off, yank a ribbon cable out, plug the mod chip in, plug the ribbon cable into the mod chip, plug the mod chip in, run a red wire over to the power, and either solder it in or jab it in there. So you don't have to solder it, but it's recommended. But you can get away with jabbing it in there securely so that it won't move around, and then you can play burnt games all day. Now, the primary format of the game is the CD-ROM, but if you notice back here, there is a cartridge port. And the most important thing, and the thing I whore out on my channel the most, is my series of videos about the Sega Saturn Netlink. This is my spare Netlink modem. And with it, you can play games online. And the reason I put up air quotes, which you only saw half of, is it direct dials. So this modem will dial out on an analog phone line to another person with the Sega Saturn and Saturn Netlink, and it'll make a direct connection. They will call each other. It does not go through the internet. It's just a direct phone call through an analog phone line. And then there's 5 games that are compatible with the Sega Saturn Netlink, and most of them are really fun. I'm not a huge racing fan, so Sega Rally and Daytona USA CCE Netlink Edition are not my kind of game, and I'll probably never play them. But you can play Duke Nukem, Saturn Bomberman, and Virtua On, which is a mech fighting game. And you can play those 2-player. Saturn Bomberman supports up to 4 players online. It's really cool. And the other important thing that goes in here, which I'm not going to bother to get up, but memory carts. Kind of like the Sega CD memory cart, will plug in here. And that's what I keep in my main Saturn. My main Saturn that I have over here, my modded one. That white thing sticking out of the back is an imported Japanese, officially licensed Sega branded memory card, which I always use the Sega ones. If you try to find a US one, it'll cost you like 40 or 50 bucks. That one, after shipping, cost me 15, and I got it from Japan. All Japanese hardware will work with this. The 4-in-1 carts will work on any Saturn, and so on. So, let's see, what else is there? Alright. One important thing worth mentioning, you got this little door. And this is also in my main Saturn. Only have one. Get this bad boy off. Alright. There's a CR2032 battery that fits right in here, and that keeps all of your internal memory. If you have the memory cart, you don't need this. Well, you need the battery to keep the time, but if you have the officially licensed Sega cart, every game I've played will save directly to the cart, completely bypassing the internal memory, which there's not that much memory to begin with. Now, you can fit a little metal box slides in here, and it allows, I believe, MPEG playback, so you can play video CD. The one I have is Japanese, so it'll only play Japanese region video CDs. So someday down the line, I'm going to build a region switch and be able to finally use that. And oh, the most commonly asked question I get about the Sega Saturn. This will not play Sega CD games. Also, it will not play Sega Genesis or 32X games. They do not fit. Don't fit. Too big. Not gonna play. You can mash a Sega Genesis card in there, but the connectors don't meet up. So it is confusing to have this. But it's definitely worth having for the memory cart, and most importantly, the badass Sega Saturn Netlink. Okay, moving along. Okay, the last console in my Sega hardware collection is, you guessed it, obviously the Dreamcast. This is probably either this or the Sega Genesis is everyone's favorite Sega system. This is a very popular system still. Lots of good games, lots of great games to play on it. It's popular with a lot of people because you can just burn the games without any modification. And I like it, but honestly the Dreamcast is not my favorite Sega system. I would put this about even with the Master System personally. I really like the Sega Saturn and Sega CD. I know I'm the odd one out, but I didn't have any of the Sega stuff growing up, so I've developed these opinions in the past 3 years pretty much. So I'm looking at all the Sega stuff with fresh eyes, and I'm really impressed with the Sega Saturn and the Sega CD. Because any system with the only English translation of Snatcher is definitely a system worth loving. But this is the Dreamcast. It's got 4 controller ports, which they did not invent, but they did use pretty well. If you like that Virtua Tennis, these 4 ports come in pretty freaking handy. It used its own proprietary format, the GD-ROM, which could hold about 1.2 2 or 1.3 gigabytes of data. But most games didn't use all of that storage space, and you could burn a game to CD, which I hear the laser had to work a little bit harder to read them, so it does, you know, put a dent in the lifespan of your system. Now, this unit here has the standard 56K modem. This is not the one that I use. I used all my doubles for the ease of, you know, so I didn't have to unplug all my crap. My main Dreamcast, I have the broadband adapter. This actually did have a broadband modem, which only a couple of games could use it. I got it so that I could play Phantasy Star online on a private server, which, for whatever reason, my no Dreamcast. I have 3 Dreamcasts, and none of them will read the special enhanced disc that you need to play Phantasy Star online. So I have yet to use my broadband adapter. And as of now, I still do not have the version 3 web browser, which only the version 3 web browser supports the broadband adapter. So that kind of sucks. Tons of kick-ass games for this. Definitely get Shenmue. That's the main reason I picked this up, just to play Shenmue. And Jet Set Radio, or Jet Grind Radio. Amazing game. I love Jet Grind Radio. I love the cel-shaded graphics. I remember back in the day when this first came out, seeing those cel-shaded graphics, thinking they looked, you know, amazing, and they hold up today beautifully. And someday when I do get that model or version 3 web browser, you can actually download JPEGs to your VMU and use it for custom tags, which is pretty freaking awesome, because I really want to do that. So it's a damn shame I've not used that freaking broadband adapter. Paid out the ass for it. Still haven't used it, but I will. I'll get my custom tag in that game, and I will, god damn it, play some Phantasy Star Online. Now, this here is the Sega Dreamcast controller. And, you know, pretty much every controller that came out after the PlayStation is pretty much the same. It's got 4 buttons, shoulder buttons, D-pad, analog stick, you know, start button, 2 grips. This is almost a fantastic controller. Almost. The way these curve in, kinda like that kidney bean shaped Model 3 Genesis, or Model 1 Genesis controller, the 3-button one. I don't like it, because you have your wrist bent in like that. If you had your hands bent out a little bit, like, you know, a DualShock or an Xbox controller, or hell, even a GameCube controller finally got it right for Nintendo, be a lot more comfortable. So that's my main complaint, just the way your wrists are bent in like that when you hold on to this bad boy. And I've only noticed this problem with Jet Grind Radio. I played the shit out of that game, but after an hour of intense analog sticking around on this thing, my thumb would actually get sore. I've always read comments on the internet about people talking about various controllers having, you know, oh, sore thumb. I always thought, you know, suck it up, pussy. Your thumb's sore from wiggling it around for a while, but something about this just isn't right. It's probably that poor ergonomics giving me carpal tunnel, and I don't know. I just think if it flared out a little bit, just a little bit, this thing would almost be perfect. Now, the most interesting thing about this is the VMU, the Visual Memory Unit. You could download little games and take them with you. Runs off 2 button cell CR2032 batteries, which I hear these things only last about a month with fresh batteries in them. And CR2032s are expensive, which is why I always steal them, because I'm not paying $6 for 2 little button cell batteries. I don't steal them. I always buy my batteries. That's a terrible thing to say. But if you don't have the batteries in these memory cards, basically, and you turn on your Dreamcast, you're always greeted by a loud, squealing, screechy sound from hell. And I'm sure every Dreamcast owner knows exactly what I'm talking about. They always beep. But I've got 3 of these bad boys, and the only problem with these is I don't mind these being the memory and all that. Flash memory is cool with me. It's just that there's not much memory for each one of these. So had the Dreamcast stuck around for a good 6-7 years, a good healthy lifespan for a console, you would have had to buy tons of these. Unless you don't give a shit about your saves. Some games, if you like sports games, you go through memory bad. So I've already filled up this one. And for the most part, that blue one's filled up too. And I have a kind of a smoky gray one that I also use. And it's not anywhere near full yet, but I've already got 2 filled memory cards, and I haven't played that many Dreamcast games. But you can also have little special messages. One of the big selling points was if you're playing a sports game, you could pick your plays, your NFL, 2K, whatever. You could pick your plays on the VMU screen so that the other player couldn't see them, which is a very cool idea. It's very practical and implemented very well. But usually when you're playing a game, it'll just have a logo for the game in there. Like it'll just say Shenmue. And in the system setup screen, you can choose a little picture. I have a sweet little space squid in there. But these are very good controllers. I don't like number ratings, but I give this a solid 7 out of 10. It's a passing grade, but it's nothing to brag about and hang on the refrigerator. And seriously, the way it curves in is uncomfortable to me. Like, laying back in my swivel office chair thing, leaning back in that with my feet up on the desk and my hands in my lap is kind of comfortable, but in any other position, just the way your hands are like this, just hate it. But honestly, that's the only bad thing I can say about the Dreamcast. Overall, this is a great system. And definitely, a great last swan song from Sega. So that has been my giant epic video about all of my video game systems, and it was a long one. I think I'm going to release each video individually, as well as just smashing it all together and having, God, it's probably going to be like an hour long. But I'll have both options out there, see which gets more views. And actually, I have one more thing to look at that's Sega related. Stick around for that. Okay, and the very last piece of my Sega hardware collection, the Game Gear. Got this off Craigslist for a few bucks. I think I paid like 20, and it came with 6 or maybe 8 games, and it's not a bad system. This definitely fits my man-sized hands. I don't know what I would have thought about this, 20 years ago when I was a child, but hold on to this. It's got a pretty solid D-pad, good feeling buttons. But, like everyone knows, and actually I think I lucked out, because every time I see a Game Gear, it's missing the battery covers, which would piss me off. I don't think I'd be able to cope with that. Took 6 AA's, and with 6 AA's, it didn't even last that long. So, that kind of sucked. But mine came with the AC adapter. And, I pretty much only play video games in my house now. There's not really many instances where I'm going on a family trip and sitting in the back seat whiling the hours away with the Game Boy like I used to. That doesn't really pop up. If I go anywhere anymore, I pretty much except for the past 6 months, if I go anywhere, I pretty much am always the one driving, so that kind of sucks. And my car is manual transmission, so I can't even get away with trying to play some PSP while driving, which probably shouldn't try to do that even if I could. Anyway, this is a pretty good little system. The screen's a little assy. You have to hold it at just the right angle to see it. Might be something I could repair. Maybe it needs a few new capacitors or some such junk, but it works. It's good enough. Someday I'd like to beast up on my soldering skills so I could build a video output and possibly have a little port to use a Master System controller. I've seen that tutorial floating around, but unfortunately the only one I've seen was for the European one, and they had a SCART connection, which most Americans probably don't know what the hell a SCART connection is, but it's a big ugly thing that plugs into the back of a TV and works with those PAL phase alternating line televisions and crap that I don't know jack diddly about. But this is a pretty sweet handheld. Let's see what we got in here. Vampire, Monster of Darkness for the Game Gear. And this is actually a really sweet game. It's a Castlevania clone, but it's a damn fine one. It also exists on the Master System, I believe, which I actually ordered the Master System version on Amazon and got this. So that kind of sucks, but not really, because I had one of these bad boys lying around. So I like the way that the cartridge fits in flush with the system. Again, I like a lot of the Sega stuff. It's just the Model 2 Genesis Sega CD thing, just the way they're side by side. I don't care for that. But a lot of the other Sega stuff, it's got some really good design cues and looks really good. I've heard a few people talk shit about the Sega Saturn, but I actually think it looks really good too. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird. But this is a pretty amazing handheld. It had a little... When I was a kid, I always wanted one of these because you could get the TV thing, the TV tuner. And I don't know, just portable TVs and portable anything's always been fascinating to me. You know, a little TV in your hands. Always wanted one. And even if I got one now, can't use a damn thing. Switched over to digital. So, I also read in a book that they had a FM tuner. Like there's a radio tuner for these too. Never seen one, but I saw it in my digital press collector's guide, so who knows. Haven't even seen one of those online actually. Got your big bright red power switch up here. Power adapter. And yeah, it's a solid handheld system. There's not that many games I've played for it that I like, honestly. All of the games I've played, I really haven't liked that much. Like, you know, why would I want to play Bejeweled on that shitty screen where I can barely see the colors? Like, when anything moves real fast on this screen, it's hard to see. So there's a couple instances in this Vampire game where it's hard to see things, but for the most part, it's very, very playable on that crappy little screen. But like Sonic 2 that I have for this, you're going so damn fast, it's just blurry and hard to see no matter how much you focus on it. And a lot of games are like that, so it kind of sucks. That's why I really want the TV out, because with the TV out, I've seen pictures of that and screen caps, and it is gorgeous when it's through a regular TV. So someday I'll attempt modding this bad boy when I get, you know, good with reading diagrams and working a soldering iron. I am very much a novice with a soldering iron. My job's usually sloppy and ugly, but work. Anyway, that is the Sega Game Gear. And that has been all of my Sega hardware. I'm going to make a separate video comparing the analog pad for the Saturn against the Dreamcast controller, because I told someone I would do that several months ago, and I'm slow and lazy. So I'm eventually going to make that. But that has been everything I own Sega-wise. Things I have left to get. I want a Model 2 Sega Master System, which I do believe was released in America in very, very, very limited numbers. I've only seen auctions on eBay for them like a couple times. So I'm looking for a Model 2 Master System because it's a lot smaller, and that power base, man, that Master System's huge. And what else am I looking for? I need the Sega Nomad and a Model 3 Genesis, and I think that's it. What other Sega systems officially released by Sega Systems am I missing? Let me know in my comments if there's anything else. I think all I need is the Master System Model 2, the Sega Nomad, and a Model 3 Genesis. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for watching my brief reviews of every piece of Sega hardware. I hope someone enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you go out and buy some Sega Saturns and Netlinks and play some damn Saturn Bomberman with me. Yeah. And thanks for watching. I have plenty of more videos on the way, so stick around.